Hello and welcome to another episode of Never Mind the Dambusters with me, James Jeffries. And as ever, I am joined by my co-host, Jane Gulliford-Lowes. Today, we are making quite a special episode as this is our 50th episode. Can you believe that, Jane?
Hello, everyone. No, I can't actually, particularly as when we first embarked upon this project, we only ever meant to do about 6 episodes and see how it went, didn't it?
Yeah.
And then the first series ended up being about 3,000 episodes long. And yeah.
We've learned a lot since then, haven't we?
We've learned a lot since then. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, for our 50th episode, we thought we'd do something a little bit different and decided that we would, in fact, for this episode, mind the Dambusters. And in today's episode, we will be looking at the legacy of the Dambusters raid, Operation Chastise, and the wider collective memory and its influence and effect and where it's placed in the wider memory of RAF Bomber Command. The premise of this podcast has been to highlight the lesser-known operations and stories associated with Bomber Command because it's so often in the shadow of the Dambusters. It's so prevalent. It's so well known. Certainly for most aware of the topic, they are certainly aware of the Dambusters. And I'm sure most of our listeners have seen the 1955 film, and it no doubt played a part in why I'm here now recording this podcast, and it's likely why you're listening to this podcast now. And I remember watching it as a boy and being especially fascinated by the bouncing bombs and bouncing rubber balls along the hallway of the house where I grew up trying to hit the cat flap. Yes, I know. I also read Paul Brickell's book Not Long After, and I think it was the first Bomber Command book that I read. And Jane, I know it had a huge influence on you as well.
Yes, it has. One of my earlier memories is of watching this film with my grandparents, Jim and Lydia, at their home, just a couple of miles from where we are now. When I was very small, and my gran Lydia pointing out to me sort of all the different positions of the crew on board the aircraft and explaining to me about this is what Uncle Jack did during the war. Well, not this particular raid, obviously, but this is what he did during the war. He was the wireless operator, explaining what the wireless operator's job was, etc. And it's because of that, really, that I was sort of brought up with Bomber Command. It was always something that was there in the background. It was always something that Uncle Jack did. And I have watched this film hundreds of times. I absolutely love it. Yeah, I know it's got its issues, etc. But honestly, I just absolutely love it. It's so powerful. It's so emotional. And yeah, it's just been an absolute favourite of mine for, well, since childhood, really. It's just wonderful.
Yeah. It's an absolute classic, isn't it? But getting on with the pod and joining us today, I should introduce, making his third appearance, a hat trick, in fact, is Dr. Dan Ellin, the archivist for the International Bomber Command Centre Digital Archive, and basically an all-round legend. Dan and I were on a World War II TV show a couple of years back now, I think, as part of a panel discussing the legacy of the raid and answering quite a few questions about whether it was a national obsession. And I know we chatted a little bit about this since, and I thought it'd be great to, recover this conversation and also open up some new topics and discussions linked to it, especially diving more deeply into the influence of the raids and especially the film on popular memory. Jane, do we need to explain what the raid was? Maybe a 30-second summary for if there is anybody listening that doesn't know. I will be timing you if you want to have a go. Yeah. Okay.
Dan, lovely for you to join us again. Thank you so much for coming on to the show yet again. And it's always lovely to have you here. Right, Dambusters in less than 30 seconds. So the Dambusters, the correct name of which was Operation Chastise, and James is actually timing me, was an operation by 617 Squadron, RAF Bomber Command, which took place on the night of 17th of May 1943 to attack the Möhne, Eder and Solper dams in the German industrial region of the Ruhr with the famous bouncing bombs designed by Barnes-Wallis. And the idea was to fly at extremely low altitude, bounce the bombs like a skimming stone across the surface of the lakes, and burst the dams, which would then flood the surrounding industrial areas and halt or disrupt industrial production. 8 aircraft were lost, with 56 aircrew aboard, 53 of whom were killed and 3 were captured. Penpos figures are correct. And there was around 1,600 civilians lost on the ground, of whom about 1,000 were forced or slave labourers working in nearby factories. So there you are. That's a brief summary.
It's just over a minute, Jane, but that was good. I think we've got everything in there.
There's a lot to cram in there.
It was good. It is. There's a lot. 30 seconds I was bigger than me, wasn't I? But Dan, it's so great to see you again, as ever. The first question, the Dambusters and by extension 617 Squadron, they hold a place in the collective memory of Bomber Command's war. Why is this? Why do you think it is?
I think, the film has been with us for such a long time. It's for a long time, it was shown at Christmas, every year. It was that or The Great Escape. And it's become such an important part of cultural memory and national identity. It's a sort of comforting thing to put on and watch it, because the way the operation is portrayed, it's unproblematic. It doesn't engage with any of the nuance or complexities that there are to do with the bombing campaign. So it's a sort of cuddly introduction to the history of Bomber Command. People just sort of watch it and don't really think about any of the complexity. It is, though, a great way in for people that then want to find out a little bit more. I mean, you said that you both watched the film, you read the book. I did pretty much the same thing. I don't know how accurate my memory is, because memory is a wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey, great big ball of weirdness, folks. But in my memory, I watched the Dambusters when I was about 6. And I know I was about 6 because in my memory, I also then watched James Hunt winning the World Championship Grand Prix. So that would put it as like it was 77, which is about when I was 6. I haven't yet looked in the Radio Times to see if that's true or not, but it was around that time that I first watched it. And I used to sit in the back of my mum and dad's car, driving home from my grandma's in the evening time, and I would be the rear gunner on a Lancaster. And every time the car went over a pothole or a cat's eye, that was flak. And the passing street lights were searchlights and all those sorts of things. So big influence on me, got me into the history of Bomber Command, and I think it's done that with lots of people as well. The problem is it is an unproblematic telling of the story. I'd really like to put some of the complexity and the nuance back. When Bomber Command is remembered, it tends to be either the Dams or Dresden, but that binary in itself is oversimplistic. We need to start thinking about the whole history of the bombing war with a bit more thought.
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree with that. And very similar as well. I remember being in the back of my dad's car, and every time there were potholes, it was just like imagining it was flak or something. So, yeah,
it's a really the film is a really powerful cultural symbol. The story, it feeds into national identity. The film from the 50s follows on from the sort of propaganda that was put out after the operation during the war itself. Victoria Taylor's master's thesis is really good on that. She breaks down the sort of the film of the Dambusters and the operation of the Dambusters into different phases. So she looks at the wartime propaganda, the story of the film and the story of the Dambusters through the 50s, 60s up to the 1980s, and then again how the meanings have changed over the last 40 years as well. And that's the thing, the way that cultural memory works and the way that people remember this history, this heritage, it's fluid and it's always changing and it always gets used for different things. And that's also partly why it makes it so interesting, complicated, fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I recently read Richard Morris's biography of Barnes Wallis, Dambuster. I think we can say that out of the narrative, there are 2 individuals that stand out more than others, and we're going to talk about both. These are Wallis and also Guy Gibson, who we'll talk a little bit more about later. But regarding Wallis and the Dams raid, Morris wrote this, which I just wanted to share. The Dambusters put Wallis in a universal narrative. The novelist David Hodge has observed how all stories about aerial bombing tend towards the condition of chivalric romance, in which a hero and his companions leave home, travel into a far-off hostile land, are tested, perform courageous deeds, and return changed by what they have undergone. Lodge points to a way in which the film reinforces these connotations. Wallace is a kind, benevolent Merlin, wielding his magical power of science. Most powerful of all, the film combines an appearance of documentary realism with warfare purified of violence. In this conjuring, Wallace's weapon is intended not to kill. The nearest we get to fighting is public school-style disorder in Scampton's Mess, but to vanquish an inner giant. We see the glitter of light flak and plumes of water, but no infants being washed out of their cradles, nor bubbling skin inside burning aircraft. There are floods, but no rolling 20-foot black step of water laced with uprooted trees, bits of buildings, and howling farm animals that took more lives than any previous air raid. The Dambusters fosters the illusion of war purged of awfulness, and it put Wallace in the centre of this cleansing. Dan, do you think this is a fair examination of Wallace and the raid in general?
Yeah, there's lots of stuff in there that I agree with. I like the idea of documentary realism.
Yeah.
Lots of people they see this film as factual and true and real, and there are issues with it. I like the idea that he said it's purified of violence. The target in the Dambusters film is an inanimate concrete wall. It's the dams, and as it says, there's a little bit where you see some workers, I think, in a power station charging up some steps and ladders, and you see a train being overwhelmed by the water. But you don't, there's no mention of the thousands of people who died on the ground. I like the idea of it being a story, a sort of adventure. A chivalric romance, wasn't it? He said.
Yeah.
And of course, the action scenes of the attack on the dams was used for the screenplay for Star Wars. I also like this idea of Wallace as Merlin.
I love that.
Feeds into that feeds into the national myth of Britain as the underdogs, and we succeeded by pluck, determination, and boffins who had crazy ideas in sheds,
playing with marbles and bathtubs. Yeah,
I think for people listening, all the books that Richard Morris has written, the one on Guy Gibson, the one on Cheshire, the one on Wallace, they're all really, really well researched and all really well worth reading. But he points out that Barnes Wallis wasn't this bumbling old wizard. He was part of the establishment. He worked for Vickers. He designed all sorts of things from airships to the Grand Slam bombs. We've got a interview with Mary Stopes Rowe in the IBC Digital Archive, and talking of Wallace, she sort of alludes to the fact that Wallace saw the bombing war as a sort of version of the trolley problem. Who do you choose to kill, which is the lesser of two evils? And for Wallace, it was very much end the war as quickly as possible by using science and various bombs which he dreamt up. And his idea was, in the long run, this would eventually save lives. Whether he's right or not is up for debate. That's what he was trying to do with the dams operation. That's what he was trying to do with the creation of Grand Slams and Tall Boys. So I really like this. What the film doesn't do that Brickhill's book tried to do, and perhaps other books have done better, is talk about what 617 did next.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is equally important, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's almost, to me, like the film portrays the British almost as these sort of innocents, if you like, who are muddling along, and then they come up with this fantastic idea, to counter these terrible Nazis kind of thing. But is our brave boys doing their thing? But as you say, the sort of implications at the other side of the end result of that isn't really considered or portrayed at all. But what in fact is actually happening is death on an industrialized scale, which is what strategic bombing is all about ultimately. And it just doesn't go there at all. But I guess that's all part of how we as a nation wanted to remember the war. A question of right and wrong, we were in the right, they're in the wrong, etc. And I think that's something that we could talk about as we develop those themes later on. But we've already mentioned the film, but I think it's time to address the legacy of the raid. Do you think the legacy of the raid, as we sort of view it now in 2025, is mainly because of the film? Or do you think that views are changing?
I think a lot of it's to do with the film, and I've just thought of a couple more points. I said earlier it's a sort of comforting Christmas film. It's unproblematic as well for the status quo, because it's a boy's own adventure. There's not a lot of female input to confuse matters. We've got an old schoolmaster, so we've got a father figure and naughty schoolboys basically who are out for a jolly jape. Again, it's because it's this heroic boy's own story that is kind of comforting to watch. And yes, there's drama and there's death, but the schoolboys are the good boys and the good guys, and they're doing what the father figures told them to do, and we're not have to worry about any of this complicated stuff. It's for some people, it's kind of comforting as regards race and class and gender, and it's very much of its time. Anyway, I was diverting slightly. Is the legacy of the raid mainly because of it? The propaganda surrounding the operation was massive during the war itself, and I think it's built from there. The film then came along and amplified that. And the way that the memory of the operation is used today, it becomes slightly political, and again, it's been ramped up even further. There's lots of things that the film stands for that are some sort of cultural shorthand. Coates' theme is played at football matches, and it's used to sell beer, and everyone thinks it's funny and don't really question what they're just sort of accepting because it's been so ingrained into what people think.
I just thought the Carling advert, isn't it, with the football connotations with the goalkeeper stopping the bombs. It seems,
it's this whole thing of British identity, 2 World Wars and 1 World Cup kind of, and it's just reinforcing that simplistic way of thinking about history that I find to be an issue.
Yeah. So, okay, we're talking about the film. If you, as a historian, if you could rewrite the film, if you could add to it, change things, what would you do? What would you do?
Try and put some nuance and some complexity in it, and it probably would flop. I think people think, there's going to be a remake of the Dambusters, and they seem to assume that it's just going to be the exact same screenplay, the same script, but in colour. And why? Because you can change interpretations, you can remake things. I think Stephen Fry was working on it.
With Peter Jackson, wasn't it?
Probably 10, 20 years ago. I would like to see, as I say, a sort of Len Dayton Bomber kind of version on it, where we got multiple perspectives, and it wasn't all just this heroic tale, and it did make people stop and think. I mean, the film is unquestionably portraying the operation as a success. And this is part of what Wallace wanted to do. If they had managed to breach the Sorpe Dam as well, then it would have made a much bigger impact to the Nazis' industrial capacity. The fact that it didn't meant that it was fantastic tactical event. I'm paraphrasing Ross Mahoney here now. It was tactically, it was innovative and amazing. Culturally, propaganda-wise, absolutely massive. Strategically, almost irrelevant. And I think Philip Blood says pretty much the same thing as well. To actually have the effect that they hoped, they had to get the third dam as well. And the bouncing bombers were never going to do that because it's the wrong weapon for that job.
Yeah.
So put some of that in the story, explain that. That would be interesting. But like I said, people would hate it.
Yeah. I agree. The Sorpe Dam is so absent in it. It's mentioned within it, and to the point where I think it's just expected the audience will forget about it, that they've talked about it. I'd also add women as well. You've got them. It's either Wallace's nagging wife, sort of questioning what he's doing and such like, or they're making tea for the crews. They're making breakfast and teas for the crews, which is saying more about the 1950s than what was actually happening during the war itself, I think.
Okay, Dan, we've sort of gone over the criticisms of the movie then. Let's say some nice things about it. What does the film do well for you?
I think the aerial shots are fantastic. The fact that they had the 3 Lancasters and lots of Lincolns in the background to play with, it's a joy to watch that. You can forgive them the mocked up bomb underneath because, you know, at the time they made the film, it was still an official secret. So the fact that they got it as close as they did is quite astonishing, really. The film is paced fantastically. It's telling the story in a really accessible way, and the different parts, the way that it's structured is absolutely fantastic. And it is one of the classic war films. And unlike Where Eagles Dare and, dare I say it, The Great Escape, it does stick fairly closely to what happened. Yeah, it's a brilliant film, and for me, it is a bit like a comfort blanket that I stick on every now and then and watch. Although there are bits that I hate about it.
As a piece of entertainment, it's fantastic. As a piece of entertainment, yeah,
definitely, yeah.
And I definitely agree with you on pace there. I've watched this film with people that haven't much of an awareness of it, and I said that really stands well for a film of the 1950s. It does go quickly. It is driven, and you've got it in the 2 halves almost, which is the development of the bomb, the development of the squadron, and then you've got the raid itself.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of sitting around. It does feel like quick 2-parters. I think.
Yeah, and the fact that it was borrowed by George Lucas for Star Wars. It's almost frame by frame, and the script is almost exactly the same.
Yeah, I love that bit.
Says how filmmakers think it's a brilliant film as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the approach and the attack on the Death Star, isn't it? Where they sort of come to the Death Star.
Yeah. There's a YouTube video where you can see both of them running side by side. Yeah.
They even use the same phrase or the same sort of script in some places, don't they? Yeah. But when you think about it, though, there's only about 20 years between those 2 films, which is incredible. When you think about it,
gosh, it is, isn't it?
Yeah. So Dambusters is 55, and Star Wars is 76, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
something like
Thanks
that.
for making me feel very old.
Yeah, that makes me. Yeah, just over 20 years between them, which is incredible.
In a few days' time, I think we'll be closer to 2050 than we are to 2000.
Oh,
we will, yeah.
Yes.
55 and 77 were long before me, just to make you feel even older, guys.
I wasn't around in 55, but I was around in 77. So I actually went to see Star Wars with my dad when I was about 7 when it first came out. So there you go.
Well, anyway, we better return to the script here. I would love to talk about Star Wars, but yeah. I think we should talk a little bit about Guy Gibson. And whenever with truth and fiction and adaptations, Gibson is a complex character, like everybody is. The interpretation and portrayal of him in the film. I mean, do you want to discuss a little bit about that, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, the film was made in the 50s when you had slightly more 2-dimensional characters. I don't think they could show Gibson to be the womanizer that he possibly was if you read some of the accounts of him. So they gave him an audience-friendly platonic love story. It's one man and his dog defeats Nazi Germany kind of thing. He was a complex character. On 106 Squadron, he was known as the Arch Bastard. We've got a collection in the archive I've been working on recently from Chandler, who flew with 617 after Guy Gibson was in charge. In fact, Chandler says that he refused to join 617 until Cheshire was in command rather than Gibson because he hated Gibson. I mean, it might have been to do with the fact that I think Gibson ran him over and broke his leg. That's a story that will be in the archive soon.
Goodness.
Yeah, I mean, we don't see Gibson is this schoolboy hero, and to a certain extent he was, but he was also a flawed character. He lost the plot when someone gave him some salmon and he took it to the place where he was staying and asked the landlady to cook it, and she battered it and fried it. His reaction was quite strong. The biography, Richard Morris talks about, he interviewed Margaret North, who was a WAF who was working at RAF Royal Hospital, and Gibson was there, I think as an inpatient, but also as an outpatient sometimes. And he had a brief affair with her while he was married. So there's a story for the film that's not covered.
But as far, one, Dan, sorry, yeah, I can say so as far as Gibson's concerned, though, he's sort of become this poster boy of RAF Bomber Command, hasn't he? And there's just so much focus on that one man. And it's all because of this one raid. And I think, well, what about the 120,000 others who did equally brave things, who suffered terribly mentally or suffered terrible injuries or ended up prisoners or whatever. It doesn't have to be all about Gibson. Yes, he was astonishingly brave. He was a fantastic pilot.
Yeah.
He was a fantastic leader, subject to some opinions. Some people may say otherwise. But we shouldn't just focus on him. And nobody ever talks about all the other men who took part in the raids, or very few of them. A couple might get mentioned, but
Johnny Johnson's probably
But that Johnny Johnson's because he was the last.
The last, yeah. I'd say in recent times he's probably the only other name that's really put forward from the raid. Yeah.
But I mean, what? The other people that spring to mind that would be similar would be Cheshire or Bennett. But I'd really like to do an experiment. I'd like to do a sort of photo fit lineup with actual photos of Gibson's and then photos from the film, and then a few other chaps in RAF uniform, and see if people could actually pick out the right Guy Gibson, because I'm not sure that they would.
I think they would.
Probably lots of the listeners to this podcast would get it right, but
I'll just go for Richard Todd.
It'd be bad if we got it wrong if you tested us, wouldn't it? That's the end of me co-presenting this, isn't it?
Well, you're right. It's called Nevermind, isn't it?
But I'd like to. I feel like Cheshire, for example, is kind of in the shadows now. I feel that growing up, he was talked about, and certainly the Paul Pickle book talks a lot about Cheshire and his command of the squadron, and he's an incredible man. You think about the humanitarian work he did after the war and such like, and he has been overshadowed, I feel. Am I right in feeling that, do you think? Or
no, I think you are right, and I think part of it is because Gibson didn't survive the war, so although he was this complex character, it's easy to remember of him as this heroic, forever young.
He's the martyr, isn't he?
Who's portrayed in the film. Yeah, precisely. But
was he 27 when he died?
Oh, yeah, don't put me on the spot. I don't know anything about dates or numbers. I'm a historian.
Because that's the age with rock stars and stuff, isn't it? Like, yeah. Sorry, that just came to me then. But to carry on, sorry.
Kurt Cobain and Gibson discuss.
Oh, no, that would be an interesting discussion. Yeah. So, moving on then. Do you think the wider media perpetuates the raid as a sort of a dominating collective memory? So we're thinking about documentaries, books, films, video games, etc. Obviously, Star Wars. We've talked about the Carling Black Label advert that we've talked about as well. It's just part of our national consciousness, isn't it?
Dambusters become shorthand for Bomber Command, hasn't it? And it's the unproblematic shorthand. Yeah. The other side of the argument, you've got it's Dresden. It's all about Dresden. But for people that like to think about what Bomber Command did positively and maybe celebrate what happened, it's the Dambusters. I mean, there's this podcast. There's the virtual reality Dams raid that you can go on. Why didn't they pick another operation? Because everybody wants to know about the Dambusters. Everybody already has an inkling of the Dambusters from the film, so it's comfortable and they're not being tested too much. There are loads of books. I've got lots behind me.
Same.
I've consciously tried to avoid anything to do with Dambusters when I'm building the archive. But if you look at the tags in the RBCC Digital Archive, we have a tag for every single squadron that flew, and you go to that page and it brings up all the items that have been tagged. And we have far more about 617 than we do about other squadrons. And that's just happened organically. Some squadrons we've actively gone, we've not got much on this, we'll go out and hunt for it. But with 617 Squadron, just sat back and it just rolls in.
I guess there's also the popular history element. It sells, that's why you get the commemorative coins, details, models, etc. And that's a factor as well. And actually, I'll point a discussion on history, the influence of popular history and vice versa.
Yeah, people say, history's at risk and people are in danger of being forgotten, but it's because other certain stories get all the attention.
Yeah.
I mean, the poppies up at the IBCC at the centre itself have been fantastically well received and really, really popular. But it wound me up that they put 617 poppies in the spire to represent that squadron, and Gibson got a larger poppy than everyone else, I think. Yes, the wider media definitely perpetuates the raid as the dominating cultural memory. To answer your question, it's everywhere. Can't get away from it. And even us now talking about it, we're guilty of.
Got the title in our podcast itself. I mean, sorry, Dan.
Do you want to do that question about the narrative and nature, or is that kind of always?
Yeah. The next question we've kind of answered, but talk about the narrative and nature of the story in particular appeals to a wider public, a wider audience, and I guess it fits into that element that it is sellable as well. It is a simplified story, and I mean, placing it in comparison with a more typical Bomber Command raid, and thinking about it in that sense, it does stand out, doesn't it? Is that a factor as well?
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's at the time when Bomber Command were really ramping up massive area bombing campaign, it's a precision attack. So that's it's unusual as far as that goes. But going back to Brickell, that's what 617 Squadron ended up doing. It was trying to be precise. I think we've covered lots of it. The appeal to wider audiences is because of the way the film is made. They're attacking an inanimate concrete object. The risk is all to themselves. So they're obviously the good guys. They're making a heroic sacrifice. They are seen as the underdogs. It's the same way as the plot of Memphis Belle works. We'll forget about the people on the ground. It's just, will these guys get back or not? As you said, it's got the eccentric boffin, the wizard in it. It plays into all these stories of national identity as well.
I do like that film as well, though it's obviously very problematic, but as a piece of entertainment, it is a good film.
Yeah, great.
I mean, the important thing about the film is it is exactly as Woody said when we were on his channel talking about this. It's a jumping off point for people to do some more research and find out more and do some reading around. That's kind of about it.
Yeah. That's where it really succeeds, isn't it? I think. Yeah, even today. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, how is the raid remembered in Germany then, Dan, if at all?
Well, speaking to people, because I don't know. I'm not in Germany very often. I don't think it is remembered much at all. The difference is, I think, if you ignore the extremes of the far right and the neo-Nazi kind of movement, more people in Germany have kind of come to terms with what happened in the war than perhaps people in this country have.
Yes.
Because they were forced to take on head on what had happened and what the war was about. Whereas in the UK, it's still fairly easy for us to think of this nation as the underdogs who were fighting for ethical and moral reasons and as the good guys, and nothing that anybody in the Allied forces did could ever have possibly been wrong because, the ends justified the means and it was vital that the Nazis were defeated. There's some interpretation of one of the dams that I have seen and translated, and Chastise is known as the catastrophe. But I think it's only really remembered in the local area and the vicinity of the dams themselves and the floodwaters. And I think also possibly they're a bit brassed off with lots of tourists going there every May. I don't know. That's just what people have told me.
And I mean, it was the Battle of the Ruhr as well. It was a part of that. There are a lot of places that suffered horrendous damage not only throughout the war and onwards, but certainly in that period and around the Ruhr area and the valleys and Essen and such like. So, yeah, I always see it as part of that campaign rather than a standalone personally. Yeah. But, yeah.
And in the context, the floodwaters were terrible and they wreaked havoc and they killed people, but it's pales into insignificance when you look at what happened at Hamburg and various other cities.
Yeah.
Just in the
and
context.
it was one night, whereas other places it went on and on and on. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Just in the context of that, in the Battle of the Ruhr, we did an episode a couple of episodes ago about our favourite Bomber Command books. One of the ones that I mentioned was Battle of the Ruhr by Alan Cooper. And he mentions Chastise. I think there's one chapter on Chastise. And it's good to sort of see it fitted into that wider context, because so often it's just sort of treated as this sort of standalone thing. And I think it's really important that we do put it in that context. From my personal point of view, today, the 16th, 17th of May, that was the day that my uncle arrived at 10 Squadron to commence his operational tour. And 2 weeks later, he was taking part in bombing raids up and down the Ruhr. That's what he was doing. Also, that night is also memorable in my family because it was the night that the Luftwaffe almost kills Jack's sister, my grandmother, by dropping a parachute mine at the end of their street. So I think, we tend to kind of just focus on this and I think, that's all that was going on at that particular time. Because it wasn't. There was so much wider stuff going on. This was just one raid on one night by one squadron. And I think it's really important to place it in its wider context.
Yeah, the IBCC losses database, I think, lists about 20 other people who were killed in Bomber Command on the same night who, weren't on that operation. I think there was 2 people who died in hospital of whatever, unknown. One chap was lost gardening, and then a couple of other aircraft went, I think, probably training flights or something. The other thing that's interesting, seeing it as part of the Battle of the Ruhr, again, that's a kind of historian shorthand. I know Harris sort of named things as battles, the Battle of Ruhr and the Battle of Berlin. But it's the same with the Battle of Britain. It's the dates of when it started and when it ended aren't necessarily accurate or right, and they vary. Chastise, the Dams raid, it has become sort of shorthand for lots of different things. And in the same way as we sort of think of things in blocks, in chunks as historians, and put things together that don't necessarily always fit.
Do you think the raid has contributed to what I call the Lancasterification of the wider memory of the RAF's bombing war?
Yes, definitely. Again, for what I was saying, it's the raid has become a symbol for Bomber Command. The Lancaster has become a symbol for Bomber Command, partly because at the end of the war there were more of them than any other kind of aircraft. I know you love the Halifax, and I know you love the Blenheim.
Oh yeah.
But they were the biggest and the best that there was at the end of the war. So, and they're the ones that are still surviving and flying. So, yeah, it has. It has definitely contributed to the Lancasterification, which I might have to learn to say properly and use more often.
Yeah, it was the only aircraft in the Second World War, wasn't it? If you watch any sort of documentary.
That and the Spitfire, yeah.
And maybe the Mosquito, yeah.
There was one bomber.
But the Mosquito owes a lot to films. Even, there's the 633 Squadron, doesn't it?
Yeah, Mosquito Squadron as well. I watched that the other day, actually. And that's got a bouncing bomb in it, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I'd forgotten about it. Yeah, it's not one really to talk about, that one. But anyway, so Dan, you have someone that comes to you that's recently discovered the story, perhaps they've watched the film, and they want to know more about Bomber Command. Where would you send them, and what might you recommend them to perhaps read or do next, other, of course, than listening to this podcast?
Well, obviously, there's a podcast, and obviously, I have to say, the International Bomber Command Centre Digital Archive. 10 years ago, when we started training volunteers to do oral history interviews of veterans, obviously, we got a lot of Bomber Command people. My colleague used to call them AWACS, amazingly weird aviation crackpots. So we got a lot of people that knew what they were talking about. That's not very kind, but yeah.
I'm probably one of them, to be honest.
Yeah. My name's Dan Ellin, and I'm an AWAC. Yes. But we did get some people who had, a background in oral history interviews, but didn't have the knowledge about Bomber Command. So one of the books that we threw at them to read was Dayton's Bomber. I mean, I know it's a novel, but it covers so much. For the more academic inclined, I'd probably point them towards Richard Overy. If you want to experience Bomber Command through biography, then Don Charlwood, Jack Curry, Miles Tripp, Pip Beck if you want the WAF's eye view, Jules Roy for the French squadrons and Halifaxes. There's a really good book that I just read. I think the IWM have republished it, and it's got a foreword from Richard Overy, and it's by a chap called Leslie Mann. It's called Some Fell on Stony Ground, and it's Bomber Command very early on in the war. It's a cracking read. It's one of those. It's a novel that is almost a biography, and that's absolutely brilliant. Really enjoyed reading that one.
I'm just looking at my shelf, and I've got Jules Roy book here, the Happy Valley. Yeah. Just about the Royal Valley.
I'd go looking at my shelf. I mean, there's lots of stuff. Yeah, I'd say start with biographies, because that's kind of where I got a real feel for it, rather than reading history books, which tend to sort of do the same thing. Not great podcast. This is me staring at a bookshelf.
Well, I'm just thinking, you're looking behind, there's a wall of history books, Bomber Command and a guitar, and I turn the other way and there's a wall, in my office, there's a wall of history books, Bomber Command, with a guitar. It's just the thing that has to be done, isn't it, I think?
Well, I've got a wall of Bomber Command books and no guitar, but anyway. Yeah. I might have to get one, might have to take it over.
Oh, God, not another one. Not another singing guitar playing historian. No.
Well, I can't sing and I have no musical talent whatsoever, so I don't think anyone needs to worry too much about that. Well, I think that's all we've got time for today. Thank you, Dan, for coming on the pod yet again, and we're so glad to have you here. You're more than welcome to come back anytime. It's always a pleasure. If you've enjoyed this episode and podcast, we'd love it if you could leave us a review or a star rating on your favourite podcast platform. It really helps other like-minded people to find us. If you'd like to help us to continue to produce great content, you can support the show by becoming a subscriber for just £2.20 or $3 a month. Just hit the link in the show notes or visit nevermindthedambusters.buzzsprout.com. Please do come join the conversation in our Facebook discussion group and follow us on social media. We'll see you all again very soon. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.